"You are the man I've selected for my life ahead," the Apache woman declared to the weary farmer. The farmer had long thought that existence would always pin him down, no matter how fiercely he battled the current. His fields sprawled broadly, yet the earth was unyielding, and the harvests produced just sufficient to sustain a soul's breath, not nearly enough to raise him from the grit he sensed shackled to. Each cycle he toiled in solitude, with nobody to lean on except his own fatigued palms. Folks in the village recognized him as the reserved fellow, the one who never grumbled. Even as adversity shadowed him relentlessly, he never anticipated anyone would spot him, let alone a soul from the Apache people dwelling past the distant crest. He'd glimpsed them merely from afar. Dignified horsemen, fleet as the breeze, traversing territory that had been their forebears for ages before barriers sliced through it. Still, destiny carved its unique route when a wounded steed tumbled close to his holdings, and alongside it the lady whose arrival would transform every facet of his realm. She had tumbled, marked with bruises, but resilient and declining to reveal dread. Her plates were decorated with trinkets and plumes, her bearing majestic even in injury. She uttered few words initially, eyeing him warily as he drew near, gradually, palms extending aid. He guided her to his stable, where he nursed her wound with a tenderness she hadn't foreseen from a stranger. She observed him labor, reliable, hushed, deferential. He refrained from interrogating her, from insisting on repayment. That trait alone set him apart from countless she'd crossed paths with along the borderlands. Days slipped by as she mended in his stable, and the wordless connection between them grew profound. He'd spot her gazing at him while he labored outdoors, and she'd perceive how his frame bore a load weightier than any harvest haul. His trials were etched into his fingers, yet there lingered compassion in his tone when he conversed, something novel, yet oddly soothing. Her kin held faith in discerning the essences of those they encountered. She detected genuineness in him, an uncommon candor that couldn't conceal itself beneath scuffed footwear and calloused grips. The longer she studied him, the clearer it became that he dwelled with a subdued fortitude he himself overlooked. He didn't brag, didn't intimidate, didn't seek to dazzle. He merely endured the load fate had bestowed, embracing it sans resentment. That modesty pierced her more profoundly than any sensation in years. When her kin at last sought her out, strain mounted like a dagger unsheathed in shadow. The group eyed the farmer suspiciously, suspecting he'd imprisoned her, and he dreaded they might strike before honesty could emerge. But she positioned herself amid them, guarding him with her tone, assuring them he'd rescued her instead of injuring her. Her statements carried authority, and the group withdrew, though doubt lingered in their stares. After that, she kept returning to him, at times solo, at times with consent from her seniors, who relied on her discernment. Their dialogue stretched further. She discovered his enduring conflicts, his aspirations interred under duty, and the isolation that gripped him more savagely than any dry spell. And he uncovered her duties, her clan's demands, and the command she was fated to assume someday. Occasionally he wondered why she came back whatsoever. She was strong, assured, encircled by those who revered her. He was simply a soul striving to sustain his plot. He never envisioned she'd discern value in him, but she saw what even he couldn't. The pivotal moment dawned, one serene midday as they gathered in the hollow beyond his homestead. She approached him sans reluctance, her look resolute and steadfast. He sensed a shift in her that afternoon, something conclusive in how she advanced, her palm rising to caress his cheek with a softness that rendered him mute. "You are the man I've selected for my life ahead," she stated, her voice firm yet brimming with emotion. The phrase robbed him of air. He'd never been selected for a single thing, never been anyone's primary notion, never been anyone's aspiration. He struggled to grasp why. He struggled to accept he merited it. his torso constricted, not from alarm, but incredulity, and his gaze locked with hers in a profundity he hadn't realized he possessed. Her selection wasn't a fleeting impulse. It was a resolve forged across every instant she'd beheld him toil, converse, assist, and merely persist without craving acclaim. It stemmed from the subdued vigor she noted in him, the reliability of his essence, the truthfulness in his deeds. She'd settled on it well before voicing it, but her pronouncement ushered in repercussions neither could dismiss. A tie linking an Apache lady and the beleaguered farmer wouldn't be embraced by multitudes, neither by her kin nor by the villagers who regarded any outsider with distrust. Their realms had been divided for epochs by legacy, apprehension, and misconception. For her to pick him signified confronting it all. He absorbed the gravity of her utterance not as an encumbrance, but as a pledge he wasn't sure he warranted. His words quivered as he had last replied, not from terror, but from grasping that the road forward would test all they knew. They'd both foreseen it. The hollow seemed to contract around them, as if the terrain itself paused, awaiting to witness if he'd embrace or reject the option laid softly, boldly in his grasp. He'd never pictured that one phrase, delivered with such assurance, could upend the earth underfoot. Her assertion lingered in his thoughts long past the hush that fell between them, compelling him to face sentiments he'd entombed beneath years of toil. She regarded him as if beholding what he'd never glimpsed in himself, and that daunted him beyond measure. He confided he required moments to absorb the import of her words, but even so, she didn't retreat. She remained resolute, assured in her verdict. She'd selected him not for needing a guardian or rescuer, but because she'd felt the virtue within him, the sort of virtue that molds a fellow's path, if afforded opportunity. She sought no figure of prominence or riches. She desired one whose soul was constant, whose core bore truth, sans pursuit of gain. But such verdicts bore entanglements. Her group upheld customs, anticipations, and schemes threaded ages prior to her encountering the farmer, and he recognized how the locals gossiped of any who didn't resemble or dwell like them. He'd witnessed the glares they cast at Apache travelers through the exchange outpost. The censure was keen, vocal, unyielding. He worried that embracing her selection would inflict suffering on her, but she declined to view it thus. When she ventured back to her kin to confer with her seniors, the atmosphere thickened with unease. Some voiced bewilderment, others worry. They probed if the farmer could genuinely comprehend their practices, if he'd esteem their rights, if he possessed the fortitude to align with a lady bound for guidance. She countered their qualms with unshakable conviction. She assured them he was the sort who revered others, sans seeking recompense. She assured them he heeded, absorbed, and assisted without craving commendation. She assured them he bore endurance in quietude, a trait most disregarded, yet even her candor couldn't hush every murmur. A handful in the group backed her verdict, but others dreaded forfeiting her to a realm that had oft regarded them with enmity. They wished not her prospects tethered to strife. After prolonged deliberation, the seniors consented to encounter the farmer personally, to gauge if the fellow she championed truly embodied the uprightness she portrayed. The day they reached his homestead, he sensed ill-equipped. 3 seniors and a few guardians arrived with her, their scrutiny keen, perceptive, appraising each nuance of his nature. He held himself erect, though his hands grew slick with anxiety. He welcomed them courteously, proffering refreshment and shelter. He shunned attempts to dazzle. He merely behaved as ever, permitting his authenticity to articulate. One senior queried him sternly, inquiring what he reckoned he could provide their kinswomen. He responded with frankness. He admitted scant fortune, no sway, and no assurance in sowing times. But he vowed that should she elect to align with him, he'd esteem her, embrace her heritage, safeguard her honor, and never impede her from her destined role.
He vowed he wouldn't compel her to forsake her folk or rights, and that he'd journey alongside her, not leading or trailing.
Another senior inquired if he grasped the trials awaiting: scorn from her group, bitterness from the villagers, and the extended legacy betwixt their spheres. He conceded he did, yet added that certain routes merited traversal, however arduous. The sincerity of his reply echoed more deeply than anticipated. Her folk observed him mend a barrier during their stay. They observed him tend a harmed wanderer calf sans delay. They observed him address her gently, sans seeking to dominate or possess. Gradually, their hesitations eased. They recognized she'd chosen a man of principle, albeit his surroundings rugged and his means sparse. When the seniors at length pronounced, their ruling was guarded yet equitable. They informed her that if this was the fellow she trusted, they'd respect her election. They wouldn't obstruct. Their sanction didn't dispel forthcoming hurdles, but it lightened the strain upon both their spirits. The farmer sensed a thankfulness he couldn't wholly convey, and she felt her people's valor bolstering her. But the tale didn't conclude with endorsement. The villagers responded predictably. Murmurs, verdicts, and icy looks permeated whenever she strolled the bazaar at his side. Some hissed slurs beneath breath. Others veered away as if she posed peril. The farmer endured the glares too, comprehending that selecting her entailed facing folly squarely. Yet amid every trial, she stayed by his flank, and he upheld her, declining to let bias's pressure crook his resolve. They cultivated the soil jointly, each dawn forging an existence beholden to none's dictates but their own. Her nearness infused fresh vigor into the homestead, not via exertion, but via conviction. She recalled him each day of the fellow she envisioned in him, the one she'd elected. As seasons unfolded, the very souls who'd once murmured began to remark her poised carriage with dignity, his courteous demeanor toward her, and how their link endured firm against all efforts to sever it. Bit by bit, perspectives altered. Not everyone, but sufficient to steer the breeze toward tolerance. Their narrative sprang not solely from strife, but from the resolve that ignited it. The instant she laid her palm on his visage and conveyed he was the fellow she'd elected, that election formed the bedrock of all they erected, all they withstood, and all they envisioned in unison. And in serene interludes, when he gazed upon her at his side, he comprehended that her election hadn't merely reshaped his tomorrow, it had bestowed one upon him